And we'll continue with the Dutch efforts and experiments. Sjir Hoeijmakers, a member of the Dutch movement, involved in the practical experiences with municipalities in the Netherlands. Please.
Hello everyone, very nice to be here and to see so many faces as well. I saw it was fully booked, that's quite amazing, and it's just one of the many things that shows that this has been growing a lot in the past few years. It also has in the Netherlands. Let me begin by, it's already there, good. Let me begin by shortly introducing myself so that you know where I'm coming from. Oh, here it is. All right, so my name is Sjir. I've been involved in these experiments in a kind of, uncommon way, I guess. I've been independently involved, mostly not from kind of the basic income movement, but out of kind of an independent place. I've crowdfunded my own basic income in order to do this, so that I'm not dependent on any kind of payment for it, that I'm not for any organization or for any purpose except for the kind of the greater good of having good experiments run. And I've been helping municipalities set up these experiments, advising them, starting to kind of create coordination between them, lobbying with politicians to make room for these experiments, bringing academics together, kind of everywhere in between. I've been trying to have an overview of this and trying to make this proceed in a good way so that it's not being terminated or executed in a way that's not going to be helpful. So that's kind of my involvement. What I'll talk about today is exactly what's standing there. So how have they arisen, these experiments, these municipal experiments in the Netherlands? What do they entail, and what their current status is. So where are we now? To start off, we haven't started yet, just like Finland. We're hoping to start in 2017, but I'll get to that in the end as well. First, how did we get here? Okay, so where did it come from? The debate in the Netherlands is also relatively, well, it has been there multiple times in history, but 3 years ago, there was an article in a journalist published an article on basic income. His name is Rutger Bregman. Maybe you've ever heard of him. He's also published an international book right now, Utopia for Realists, on basic income, which was first a Dutch book. He's one of the people that started this discussion 3 years ago by publishing an article, which was then, which got a prize and was like hugely discussed. And then there was also a TV show about this with him. And from that point onwards, just things started rolling and happening. This transformed in experiments for multiple reasons. And the nice thing about what happened in the Netherlands is that we have multiple different places where this all started. So all these experiments have kind of different starting reasons, different people are involved, and also there are different objectives in that sense. So some of the reasons that this happened, that this discussion about basic income ended in experiments, are kind of dissatisfaction with our current system in the Netherlands. So that it's too complex, that it's too much based on distrust instead of trust, that it's too, that there's this poverty trap, that people don't earn money directly when they start working. This is one part of it. There's also all the other reasons there may be for basic income. So technological unemployment, there's just concerns about basic security. There's any of the reasons that you can basically think of, they all come into play, and that's the nice thing. That's also why local politicians from parties across the political spectrum have taken this initiative. So we have 19 municipalities right now that want to start an experiment in the Netherlands, and this includes, to put it in context, there are quite some municipalities in the Netherlands, so there's like, I think more than 200 and 300 municipalities in the Netherlands, but these 19 include, I think, 7 of the 10 largest cities, largest municipalities in the Netherlands. So it's about a big chunk of the political spectrum in the Netherlands. And it's really been across the political spectrum. So it's interesting when you look at it. I once looked at this and saw that of the aldermen, so the people, the kind of the ministers of the municipalities involved in these 90 municipalities, all political parties that are in parliament are represented in those things. And it's quite a thing to say in the Netherlands because we also have a kind of big parliamentary system. So we have about like 8 parties that have at least also a local representative in parliament. So that's quite interesting to see. It's not that it's as popular in every party, obviously. So some parties are more interested than others, but all are open to experiments, at least, in these municipalities. So that's why these initiatives came from different parties and also were supported by different majorities in different municipalities. And this gave rise also to different intentions, and hopefully also will give rise to very different experiments that will test different things, and will keep this discussion a broad discussion that's not going to be polarized into one direction. And that's also one of the things I'm trying to do in this discussion. So that's kind of how we got here. That there's many more things going on with basic income in the Netherlands. We've also had the crowdfunding campaigns. We also had a citizens' initiative that now has collected enough signatures for it to be treated in Parliament. Actually, this week we had basic income treated in Parliament for the first time by a parliamentary committee because of an initiative by a member of Parliament. So all these things are happening in parallel with these experiment initiatives, and that's very exciting to see. So next year we'll have elections as well in the Netherlands, parliamentary elections, so maybe it will be a topic then. We're currently seeing that happens. Okay, so, but how do these relate exactly to basic income? Guy already pointed to that there are definitely differences between a full basic income trial and what's happening right now, so in Finland as well as in the Netherlands, and there are different reasons for that. I'll get into that. Let me first explain what are exactly the contents of these experiments. What are they about? So to understand that, you have to understand the kind of differences there are right now between our current social security system in the Netherlands and a full basic income, given by the definition that Guy also, Professor Standing also gave in his talk. And there are four differences. There's many ways in which you can define it, but there's four main differences. And I'll go through them shortly. There's conditions and controls. So these are kind of the behavioral conditions Professor Standing talked about. This is that you have to apply for a job. You have to kind of show that you're applying for a job. You have to participate in all these mandatory courses. You have to report what you're doing, etc. There's all these conditions attached. It's quite a long list, which you have to apply with if you want this most basic social security system benefit we have in the Netherlands, which is called bijstand, which is kind of translated from support in English. Then there's the poverty trap. We also kind of hinted at this as well. Professor Kangas also hinted at this, that this is an important thing in Finland. So there's currently, if you start working from this benefit in the Netherlands, from this support benefit, you won't directly in a net sense earn money on top of it. So first your benefit is replaced by your salary. So imagine you're earning like, first you don't have any job income yet, so you have just a full allowance, and then you start working, you earn, say, a half-time job at minimum income at like 750 euros a month. Well, this will then, your allowance will also be lowered by 750 euros a month, so net, you won't earn anything. This is the poverty trap, the welfare trap, or there's many different words for this. And this is one of the problems we have in our current system, and a difference with the basic income system, obviously. Then the household versus individual, Professor Stelling also pointed at this one, and there's direct or indirect accounting for income. This is the most complex one. This is kind of the difference between a negative income tax and a basic income system. In that in a negative income tax, you look at someone's income and then decide whether you put something extra on top of that, whether they need something extra. Whereas with the basic income, of course, it's universal, so you pay it to everyone. So you indirectly account, because you will still raise taxes to pay the basic income, to pay back basically the basic income later, because of course it has to come from somewhere. So in the basic income, there's indirect accounting, everyone gets the basic income, and we're paying it indirectly by the taxes people pay again, whereas in a direct system like a negative income tax, that's different. So we currently have this direct approach as well in the Netherlands, which is another difference. It's not universal, like I said. These are the four differences, and these experiments will be about the first two. And there's reasons for that. There's different reasons for that. So why are they about the first two? Well, the most practical reason is that the municipalities that wanted to experiment with basic income, they only have limited power, of course. Social Security only is partly in the hands of municipalities, and they control the execution of this support benefit. And in that sense, they cannot control some things that are in national law in accordance with this benefit. So they could only find this article in the law that they can use to change the first two of these things. Even if they wanted to do a full basic income trial in the municipality, they can't. So they can only do this for people in this benefit right now. So they can't make it universal because they can't control taxes, just like in Finland. That was a hard thing. Municipalities can't do that in the Netherlands as well. There's more reasons why this happened in a municipal sense and why these municipalities are doing it like this. It's partially because we had a new law enacted last year, which gave municipalities this power and this kind of responsibility over this, more responsibility over Social Security. So they also wanted to take the initiative with this. There's also reasons, of course, just like Professor Kangas said, why you would maybe start with people in Social Security first, if you have any budget to do an experiment, because of course there you expect maybe the biggest effects, at least the kind of low-hanging fruit effects, even though there is the danger, as Professor Stanley correctly pointed out, I guess, that you won't have these community effects as well represented. There are, however, and this is these two first differences, these two conditions and control and poverty trap, this is what the experiment's all about. There are differences, however, between the municipalities, as I already pointed out. So some will, for example, focus more on the community effects by trying to at least give everyone in a certain neighborhood that is on support the same kind of treatment and see how that affects. Often people who actually are in the kind of same socioeconomic situations live together. There's still, of course, unfortunately, a lot of segregation in that sense, also in the Netherlands. So this will also do something in a community sense. There are these kinds of ideas, for example. There are other variations that municipalities have thought about, for example, by Utrecht, for example, the one you maybe heard about in the news. By coincidence, it's a funny anecdote, but I don't have time, unfortunately, now to go into that detail, but why they have gotten into the news. But they have other treatment groups as well, so they also want to experiment with what happens if you provide people with incentives to comply with some of the conditions and not with others, etc. So there are all kinds of variations in experiments, but most of them will deal with these first two differences between basic income and kind of set two steps basically from our current system to a basic income system. And in a sense, you could say it's not a full basic income experiment. That's important to point out. But it's also, it puts two of these very important parts of basic income into the system, because you now provide real basic security, and in that sense also a certain sense of freedom, although you can still maybe have the stigma there. You can still not have the universality, and you're still doing this on a household basis. Okay, so I'll have to move on. There's a lot more to say about the exact contents of every municipality, what they're doing. So I'm be happy to answer any questions you have later on that. But what's maybe important to note here as well is that in the Netherlands, because they are not full basic income experiments, even though most of them started from municipalities having the discussion about basic income in their own local government, they started talking about basic income and then thought, hey, what can we do with basic income? And this is what they could do. Even though it came out like that in the media at first, there have been pragmatic reasons to kind of detach these experiments from basic income in the Netherlands as well. So we now have kind of two parallel discussions in the Netherlands, also with the parliamentary elections coming up next year, about basic income and about these experiments. We needed that because locally people were very in favor of talking about basic income, but on the national level, this was, especially in our government, in our current government, which is the Social Democrats and the Conservative Liberals, their basic income was still controversial, especially with the Conservative Liberals. And because Conservative Liberals are slightly larger than the Social Democrats, they kind of have power over the Social Democrats, and this led to all these political problems. So it's been mostly practical reasons and political reasons why this has been, for example, rebranded into trust experiments or rule-free social security. There's been all these kinds of names given to it very creatively, and that's been a way to proceed with these experiments, while at the same time sometimes they're talked about as basic income experiments, full basic income experiments. So we have to be, and that is going to be one of the major challenges in the coming years, to be very clear about what these experiments are exactly. So they're not full basic income trials, but what they can say is tell us about basic income as well. So what are the things they do provide information about? So one of the most heard arguments against basic income, of course, is that it would make people lazy if they have basic security. Well, these experiments do say something about that, at least. And you could even say that they, for many of these people making these arguments, they present kind of a worst-case scenario, because these arguments are often made about people in Social Security, that they would be lazy in some sense. So these experiments do say something about that. And we need to be very clear about these hypotheses we'll have, and these will differ across municipalities. We'll need to be very clear about what these experiments do say and what they don't say about basic income in general. Then to where are we right now? Like I said, there's 19 municipalities from all kinds of political directions. So, and like I said, there were different incentives. So some will maybe focus more on this poverty trap. Some will maybe focus more on what it does to well-being, what it does to health, what it does to initiative, to community feelings, etc. Community initiatives, etc. So that's very interesting, and we hope this diversity will be respected. Researchers have been involved from different universities, and from also different backgrounds. So we have health economists, we have people from historians, we have people from all kinds of disciplines as well that are interested in this and want to contribute. And part of my job has been to bring these together and to see that we have both a solid research foundation with a large sample, with common measurements, but also a diversity of things we measure, a diversity of hypotheses, and not just focusing on just one aspect of it. So this is still a challenge, but the biggest challenge has been national government. And it's quite a shame because this law that was enacted last year was actually about giving municipalities more room. It's a decentralization law to do these kinds of things, to experiment. Rhetorically, it was about that, but in practice, there's still a lot of control that the national government wants to have on this. And like I said, the current government is not the most in favor. So there's been a lot of political games kind of being played in this. And so we've been basically talking with these municipalities to the national government for the past year, and it has been postponed and things happening, and we've been putting forward motions, parties have been putting forward motions in Parliament to try to speed things up. So that currently we are at this point. Right before the summer, and this is the last point I put there, a new motion was adopted. Last year, November, there was another motion, but right before the summer, a motion was adopted that states January 2017 as a target goal to start at least some of these experiments. The minister or the State Secretary of Social Affairs said that should be possible if everyone cooperates. Now, the problem is this State Secretary is actually the one that has been, in a sense, postponing things so much because of this political atmosphere, this political pressure of the other party. And this means that we're still waiting on the official legal document. So the Ministry of Social Affairs should soon release the concept version of the legal document that will make the experiments possible. They should have already done this, to be honest, half a year ago. This has been going on for a long time. Now there's more and more pressure, so this should happen actually this week or next week, if anything goes well, but we've been surprised a lot of times before, so it could take longer. And it will all depend on that document. So we're quite sure right now that these experiments can start, to a certain extent, that there will be municipalities allowed to do this, but the contents of these experiments, how ambitious can they be? How far do they go? And to what extent do they measure a broad spectrum of hypotheses? To what extent can we really relax this poverty trap? To what extent can we really take all these conditions away or part of these conditions away? That is still very much in the hands of, unfortunately, a political game at the national level. And we're working very hard, of course, with these municipalities to try to change this, to make this kind of a less politically infused process, but that's a very hard thing to do, we've noticed, and maybe the upcoming elections will change this a bit. However, we of course want to start as soon as possible. These plans have been there for some time. A year ago they had already been proposed, so we'd really want to start soon. So actually things might change. Unfortunately not today, don't have the information yet about the exact contents of this document, but next week I might have those, and after that, we'll probably need to do some more lobbying on the content, basically. But in the end, we hope that at least when these experiments come, they'll be ambitious enough to inform this debate further. And on top of that, like I said, parallel to this debate, we've also we're having the debate in the Netherlands on a kind of full basic income trial, and hopefully that will be a major part of the parliamentary elections next year. So there's both good and bad news in a sense about what's happening in the Netherlands, and it's all part, luckily, of the more positive trend. It's not easy, but we're making steps forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sjir.